Hello, my name is Mae Whittick. Welcome to Her Conversations, Tools for the Awakening Woman. Her is an acronym for Higher Energetic Resonance. This is the optimal state to embody in order to attract our highest desires. Who is the awakening woman? She's the woman who's seeking a greater possibility in her reality and looking for solutions. She knows being awakened is not a lofty ideal but a necessity. If she can transform herself, she can change the world. Her conversations will introduce you to talented women who speak to your spirituality, sensuality and soul. They share their stories and explain how they are in service to the world. So let their words and these conversations embolden and inspire you. This week's Her Conversations is less of a conversation and more of myself just speaking to you and talking about what I'm noticing in the world. I'm feeling more and more compelled to share my thoughts, little bits of things that I've found that may be able to assist others in working out exactly what is happening or trying to navigate what is happening in front of our eyes. It's such an unfolding of events that I was speaking to a friend a few days ago. She luckily managed to escape the country for some rest and relaxation. I don't know how it's going to be when she gets back in, because the regulations are changing on us almost a drop of a hat at a whim. And we were just saying, you know, had anyone had suggested that this would be the way that the world is now 6 months ago, when, you know, we were working freely, even less than that, even February, early March, that now things would be as they are, you just can't imagine it. But you know, in order for it to get to this point, everything needs to happen in a very gradual way. And what I'm seeing now is I'm seeing a lot of fear, and the task for me and the task for us who feel that we are able to see through the narrative and through the illusion that is being presented to us is be able to feel compassion. This is one of the great spiritual tests, I think, for us all. If you think, as of the 24th of July 2020, it is now mandatory in the UK to wear masks in shops and internal spaces. And still, although there are exemptions, so you can let it be known that you have an exemption without supposedly facing too much resistance or being forced to prove what the case is for your exemption. And what I really noticed is, and I'd made an effort to do as much errands and things that I needed to do out in the high street and in the stores the day before, because I figured that there would be a major switch in the way that people were going to be behaving and the fear. And I was in exactly the same street the day after, simply because I needed to meet someone. Otherwise I wouldn't have gone. And the energy was just different, almost as different as days to night. And people seemed so resigned to the new normal. They were believing that their actions were for the greater good. And what's not being made clear is whose good is this for? I mean, if we look back, and it's very easy to trace back in the UK, and I'm sure around the world, that your officials and governments and pundits have been putting this information out to you, that none of the promises that they've kept to us have been kept. And then we just keep being led by confusion and gaslighting and tyranny. It's like you can go back and see videos of them saying categorically that the masks aren't going to make a difference, that they aren't going to help anybody, and yet at the tail end of this pandemic we are actually adopting this as a mandatory thing for our safety. This is where I start to get confused, and this is also where I think we may have an issue, because as we continue to have the mass of the populace led by fear, why do we think it's just going to stop with you can't come into the shop if you don't have a mask? If you look into in newspapers, and there have been reports, granted they've kept them kind of undercover, that there has been a miscalculation in the statistics, and somehow it's kind of just slipped under the radar. No one said anything, there's been no outcry. And as I said, there's plenty of footage with people saying that there's no evidence of this helping us in any way. So the question is, what are we really afraid of at this point? Is it that we're afraid of catching the virus and being fined for not having a mask on? Or are we afraid of standing up and being heard, being that lone voice? Because we probably will find that we're not the lone voice. There is a groundswell of people that are just looking at what is happening with disbelief. And then in addition to this, we've got the self-righteousness that has arisen amongst the public. And this is a perfect divide and conquer tactic. You just get the people to police themselves. So people are now buoyed by the media and figures within the media, name-calling and insulting people who choose not to wear a mask. So that you can have a complete stranger come up to you and decide that they're going to call you selfish and stupid and really derogatory names for you taking a stand and using your common sense as to why you feel that it's not a necessary action for you to take. And they're using the media to guide them to insult the people who are not in fear, who are able to see that something's not right, there's a game being played. They take it upon themselves then to publicly shame people and then use the group think and the group mentality to embarrass people into thinking that they're doing something wrong. And what we need to do is we need to look at numbers. We need to have a basic education in what statistics are, what they look like, what the numbers look like, before we head off into panic. So this is where critical thinking comes in. This is where we have to kind of look at what's being told and then do our own investigation. No, this is seems like a mammoth task for people to do. And I would say if your initial thought is resistance to doing the work and you are using the excuse that you're not good at maths, or at this point it's not good enough, because lives are at stake now, and maybe you don't see it now by just thinking, well, why don't you wear a mask and we'll get over it. But the longer that we continue to go along with things that don't make sense, they'll continue to do things that don't make sense. So unwillingness, ignorance to your knowledge, not wanting to educate yourself will, and it has left you wide open to manipulation. So if you need to understand how these things work, if you're a visual learner, if you're audible, you can find out. The information is there. You can go to YouTube and find out all of this information. Use Google, all of this there. You need a pen, you need a paper. And this is where I say do your own figures, do your own numbers. First, what we need to know is, what is the population of your country? So work out how many million are alive in your country, how many people have died because of the virus. And obviously this is a tricky question, because the way that that death certificates were categorized weren't necessarily dependent on somebody dying as a result of the virus. It was kind of in a very catch-all, loose category that ushered in and bumped the numbers way up. So it can be a tricky question, so you have to try and find out where the truth is, and it may be that the true number is not available. However, many organisations now are starting to look at where the numbers are, and they're being reduced by thousands, tens of thousands. Also think about, what is the percentage of people who have died as a result of the virus? And then now that you have that percentage, go back and now look at how many people on any given day die in your country. So now you have the population, now you also know how many people die on every day, just a catch-all of deaths of everything. And then you want to look at what percentage of people have died because of the virus. And then also now look at a breakdown of the causes of death and how many people die from what causes. So take into account cancers, heart issues, renal issues, brain kind of like brain hemorrhages. What else do people die of? Car accidents, electrocution. There are so many different reasons why people die, and see where on the list of known deaths per day, where that fits in as well. And then find out what the definition is of a pandemic, because this word has been ushered into the populace and we've just been thinking of plague and pandemic and these numbers. And think about, for me, what a pandemic means is, or what I was expecting to see as a result of this virulent virus that was going to take us down. I was expecting to have lost at least 30 to 40 minimum % of the people that I knew or had at least a first base connection with. That's not happened. Once removed, I know somebody from the other side of the world who was categorised on their death certificate as having that, and that's not what they actually died of. They had renal issue prior to going into hospital, and then the treatment that they received forced them in a direction that then ended their life. And then also look at what the survival rate of people is who come through having the virus and then recover and get on with their lives. And it's kind of in the high 90s. I'd say even kind of like 98, 99%. So that, in comparison to the amount of people that are dying per day, you can see how by just isolating an incident and just focusing on that, so that every time you open your newspaper or turn on the news, there's a graph, and then it's saying this many people, this many people. So it's just putting a number in your head, and that number will be going up or going down, and you'll either feel better or worse as a result of this specific number, as opposed to looking at it how it relates in the populace. It's not nice to lose people, but death is part of our experience here. So we have to bear that in mind. And it's just seeing how sad it is to see this separation growing. We're seeing that those who are really steeped in fear have abandoned themselves. They're willingly waiting and they're following guidelines that make no sense, that promise safety as long as people obey what they do. That in itself is abuse and bullying, in my opinion. And then the people who are free thinkers, they're called selfish, and they're watching as you can actually see where people are in their mindset. It's like you never realised that it was so easy to drive people. You didn't realise how fearful people were. And what concerns me more than anything is the long-term mental effects that this is going to have. I mean, we can see what the immediate impact has been. We can see that people are drinking more, people have more anxiety, people are losing their temper more, they're just confused, their lives are falling apart in front of them and they don't know the bigger story, so it's out of context, so it doesn't make sense. And then also, as a result, people are using this mask now to their advantage, as in, there was me just checking over the daily newspapers just to see what they're feeding everybody, is a group of guys just go into an electrical shop and grab a handful of like tablets and smartphones and computers, and they can run in and run out because, they're wearing a mask, so they're allowed in and you can't catch them, you don't know who they are. So again, it's not always working out for the best. But positively, right now it feels like all is lost, but I do really still believe that there is hope and that we can prevail. And the reason that I believe that we can prevail is because I have faith. I have faith that I wasn't born here to be part of a desecration of humanity like this. I was born here, I was given a voice and a vision to help awaken. This is why I started this podcast, Tools for the Awakening Woman. So as I'm seeing things, I have it within me that I can't just sit back and watch and just keep it to myself and be too fearful to say what is on my mind. Find a way of centering yourself. The reason that people are easily led into an ideal and take it without question is because they don't have any knowledge of themselves. If you had a knowledge of yourself, you would know what you think. It wouldn't matter what anybody else thought, be that the closest friend, your spouse, your children. It would be, this doesn't feel right to me, and you would stay fast in that, and sometimes you would have to defend your thought as opposed to ignore and abandon yourself for the sake of what the mass is telling you that you should or should not do. And building into that, growing that, would be digging deeper into your practice. We need to do this more so than ever before. Meditation, prayer, contemplation, sitting in silence, whatever it takes, and just allowing your mind to bring whatever it is up for you. Journaling, thinking about, what is all of this trying to show us? What is all of this trying to tell us? What is it revealing to us, really? And if you take that with you before you sleep, often the answers will be with you during your sleep in dreams, or it will be the thoughts that arrive with you as you wake in the morning. And this is a tricky one, but we do our best, to inform our brothers and our sisters that we see who are still caught up in the hypnosis, caught up in the lies, who are still sleeping. But it's also essential that you protect your own energy. Negativity has a very dense charge to it. It's very addictive. And it's loud, and it's determined, and it is always right. And people in fear are rooted to their ego, which is rooted to their opinion. Once you get knowledge of yourself and separate from the need for this ego and the need for what you say to always be right, then you find that you're able to ebb and flow. And if you find out something is not correct, then you're able to admit to that without feeling that part of you is going to die. People who are rooted in fear cannot let that go. They're not able to think logically, and they, more dangerously, are unaware that their acquiescence is releasing humanity of their final freedoms. And if we don't become more cognizant of what is happening and where this is going, we will get to a point of no return. And my thoughts are, these mind games are here to test us, to see how susceptible the population is, and the evidence is disappointing. It is way too easy to fool most of the people most of the time. And maybe in order to just wake us up, who knows, maybe this psyop is a psyop in itself. Maybe they'll be able to continue to suggest more and more ridiculous guidelines until the penny drops and we snap out of it and start looking around. But when will that be? How ridiculous would it have to be? Would it be that they're saying if you tap your head and rub your belly that will help you? Or is it going to get to the point where we're deep in multiple people are casualties of the vaccine that's being hurried to market without any proper evaluation? Is it then that we realise that the tinfoil hat wearers, conspiracy theories, crazy, selfish people were the ones that were actually trying to let everybody know? So these are my thoughts on what's happening this week. There are so many other narratives that are interweaving and playing out right now. We still have the ongoing reality of trafficking worldwide, and I'm learning more about this, and I'm feeling more passionate to get involved and do something, because it's very hard to think that you as a soul voice has some opportunity to make a difference, but we actually do. It's because we all sit back and we think, well, I'm just one person, I can't do anything. But there are lots of one persons thinking that they can't do anything, but then it still takes one person to just say there's something not right here. So it is in our hands. We're awakening. And if we stand firm in our belief and our clarity of mind and keep just pointing out where things don't add up, where we don't feel that there's logic or common sense or our best interests at heart, it's not necessarily the case that anyone is going to take on board what you say the first time or the 100th time, but you're dropping in seeds, and it will then take one piece of straw that will break the dam of and suddenly the realization and the scales will come from their eyes, because together we're strong and we do have more power than we currently know. We just need to tap into that. Thank you for listening to this week's episode of Her Conversations. You can find out more about me on my website. That's carolmaewhittick.com, carolmaewhittick.com. I'm on Facebook under the same name, and I'm also on Twitter, on Instagram, and now on Parler under Casmic. That's CAZMICK. Until next week, stay strong, stay focused. Thank you.